Benjamin Fulton French has now faced his trial. The jury had heard all of the evidence, and it was now about to hand out its verdict. This was a landmark case, as the fine for the crime of contempt of court would be the largest ever to be charged to a defendant at that time. While the verdict of guilt or innocence would be easily reached, the jury would have a harder time compromising about the fines to be paid. Come along with us as we see the verdict is rendered, and the Kentucky State Court of Appeals will also be involved in the case. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. Please do not attempt to remove the safety bar while the ride is in motion. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The verdict is reached. Hold on to your bonnets and bowler hats, as this verdict was going to be epic. In 1905, there had never been such a case before the courts. Contempt of court was not a charge that was seriously taken on. It mainly was up to the jurisdiction of the court on whether the charges would be brought and the fines or jail time would be imposed. All quotes in this section are according to the Hartford Republican, dated September 15, 1905. Quote, French, guilty. Fined $5,000 for contempt of court. Jury believes in sustaining dignity of the court. 2 favor fine of $25,000. Unquote. A small note. According to the CPI inflation calculator in 1905, $5,000 would be the equivalent of $175,236.93, and $25,000 would be the equivalent to $876,184.66 in February 2024. Continuing forward with this article. Winchester, Kentucky, September 9th. After being out since 1:45 p.m. today, the jury in the B.F. French contempt case was brought in a verdict of guilty at 10 o'clock tonight and fixed its punishment at $5,000 fine with no jail sentence attached. Interest here all the afternoon has been intense. Crowds have been congregated on every street corner, and nothing else has been talked about. It was predicted early in the afternoon that the jury had determined his guilt, but were hung on the question of punishment. Such proved to be a mistake. Unquote. So, this was not a matter if French was going to be found innocent or guilty. This was a matter of how high the price would be for French to pay the courts for his actions. Keep in mind that French was an attorney himself and was a judge for a short time. This may have been one of the reasons why his fine was set so high, because he knew better than to break the law in the manner that he did. But this was not the end of the story for French. He was not happy with the verdict, and therefore he filed a motion for a new trial. Quote, French, through his attorneys Hayes and Stevenson, immediately filed grounds for a new trial, and Judge Benton continued the hearing on the motion until the first day of the regular term, which is Monday. Unquote. We are not told what grounds was stated for the request of a new trial. However, it must have been interesting, as Judge Benton was setting a new hearing for this motion for the following Monday. The article goes on to describe how the verdict was decided. Quote, the verdict came tonight as a surprise. While it was expected all afternoon, this evening it became apparent that the jury was badly divided. About 8 o'clock, they sent word to the court that they wanted to go to bed, as they could not agree tonight. Judge Benton sent word that they could go whenever they wished, whereupon they decided to stay a while longer. Unquote. So, it was getting late. The jury had been in deliberation since earlier that day, and they were getting tired. For some reason, either they were getting close to a figure in a compromise, or they just needed the reassurance that they would not be there all night long. However, 2 hours later, the jury did reach their verdict. The reason behind the charges are now explained in the article. Quote, this makes the second defendant in these cases that have been found guilty. Felix Feltner was fined $3,000 and 2 years in jail. This is the largest fine ever imposed for contempt in Kentucky. The cause of this action arose during the trial of Mrs. Auberella Markham's damage suit against the Hargis brothers, Ed Callahan, and B.F. French, tried before the circuit court in December last, when a judgment for $8,000 was rendered in favor of the plaintiff against Judge James Hargis and Sheriff Ed Callahan, the other two defendants going to acquit. It was claimed by the prosecution that the defendants conspired and spirited away Mose Feltner and Sam Fields, two important witnesses for the plaintiff. According to Judge Benton, ordered the institution of contempt proceeding against the defendants, including Felix Feltner, a cousin of Mose Feltner. Felix was tried at the last term of court, also found guilty and punished as above stated. Unquote. There was a reason why the jury could not agree. It had nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It seems that everyone agreed upon the guilt portion of the charge. The disagreement came on the price for the fine. How much would be enough for the punishment? Quote, when the jury had been discharged, it was learned that while all agreed upon the issue of guilt, the division came upon the punishment. Two of the jurors wanted to place the fine as high as $25,000. Others insisted that the fine of not more than $100. These figures offered the ground for argument. The jury finally compromised on the $5,000 fine. French was not incarcerated, as he had sufficient property in Clark County to make good the fine. Unquote. With the understanding that French was more than capable of paying off the fine, he was not given any jail time. Felix Feltner was given jail with hard labor to work off his fines. However, French would still not accept this verdict, and so he filed an appeal, and it went up to the Kentucky Appellate Court. The Kentucky State Court of Appeals verdict. It would be reasonable to believe that the reason why the appeal was accepted on the grounds that Judge Benton would not vacate the case. The fear that he would not render a fair and just verdict was in contention. The court heard the case and rendered their rulings. According to the Franklin Roundabout, dated November 24, 1906, quote, will not run off any more witnesses. B.F. French and Felix Feltner, who were fined by Judge Benton for contempt and running off witnesses in the Markham suits against Hargis, Callahan, and French, at Winchester, appealed their cases to the Court of Appeals. On Wednesday, that court affirmed the judgment of the circuit court. French was fined $5,000 and Feltner was fined $3,000 and sentenced to 2 years in jail. It won't be so funny now to run off witnesses in that section, and probably justice will be done in other cases. Unquote. So there was disdain for French and his part to play in the spiriting away of witnesses in the Widow Markham case. The fine was seen as being heavy enough of a burden to discourage such behavior again. In a later video, we will get into the cases of French charged with murder of Markham and the Feltner's case of attempted murder against Judge Hargis, as these are smaller cases that will take place both after the Hargis brothers have their trial. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.